Raju Mazumdar. How are you doing, man?
Thanks, Gautam. Thanks for the invite.
So today we will talk about psychology of property, assets, and future generations. We're trying to understand that so-called typical our affection, our immigrant affection, or in general affection towards buying house. How the whole paradigm or the society is changing or not, we will try to get into that. So the great Australian dream is a traditional belief that every family can and should own a private home for security and a better life. But it also reports that Australia's dwelling price to income ratio reached 8.4 in December 2025, which is very, very high. Australia's overall home ownership rate is falling. Personally, my take is the dream hasn't disappeared, but the access to the dream has, because you are urban planner. So how you see it?
Yeah, I guess one thing that you mentioned, the statistics come from a various range of areas. So you have the ABS, CoreLogic, OCED. So all of them have their different definitions, definitely. But I guess, yeah, what you said, the 8.4 is pretty much spot on because it's worked out from medium dwelling values divided by the average income. So some of these data sets, they use the dwelling price divided by the average household income. Others use nominal house price index, disposable income index, and some will include units and houses other than only houses. So I think home ownership has lost its cultural values and it has lost feasibility. The dream remains powerful, as we know. Access has narrowed, prices have outpaced income, and deposits take longer to save, and structural barriers have grown faster than wages or policy responses. So what the evidence shows also is that home ownership has declined, especially among young Australians, as we know, people in that age group of 25 to 35. Ownership fell from 61% to 43%. So that's a big lowering of it. Example in Sydney, that it's been at the lowest level in nearly 70 years, from a 61% to down to 58% from 2021 to 25. And I guess some analysis argue that the rate may be closer to 52% once adults living in homes owned by others accounted for. So that's quite also an issue. There are 5 points, I guess, when you look at why access has collapsed: price to income blowout, deposit hurdle, policy and tax settings, income inequity and insecurity of work, and cultural perception. So these are probably critical points that we can look at. So first one, house prices have grown faster than wages, as we know, and moderate increase in prices or interest rates now create larger barriers for entry for younger people. The deposit hurdle is saving a deposit may now take much longer than it did in previous generations, and particularly at high cost cities such as Sydney and Melbourne. Prior to that, maybe in our parents' days or grandparents' days, that wasn't a big factor. Then policy and tax settings are always changing. So depending on the government and who's coming in and what's happening in the political world in general, it affects us. So stamp duty, investors' incentives, supply constraints, amplifying the difficulty for first home buyers. Income inequity and insecurity works. So more Australians now rely on casual, contract, or variable employment, which can take mortgages approval harder and financial planning less predictable. The cultural perception is a big factor. Australia still strongly associates home ownership with stability, achievement, and belonging. The dream is still intact, increasing rewards people who already own property or have family wealth behind them. So that's why these are factors that I see. Australian home story understands as a value reality mismatch. So value home ownerships. We still talk about representations of security, adulthood, success, and belonging, whereas reality is structural behaviors now make entry increase exclusive. The dream has not died, but it has to be rationalized. And home ownership has shifted from a broad social norm to something closer to a privilege, shaped by parental wealth, geography, timing, access to stable income. The emotional and cultural weight remains, but the economic ladder is missing.
Because few of my podcasts are around well-being side, and in a couple of podcasts, few people actually mentioned just I have a big home doesn't give us the quality of life we expect. I mean, we need surroundings, we need amenities, we need people around us. So, and things are getting really complicated in many areas, as you mentioned. Next question is which I think many immigrants, especially, gone and stuck into that, which is wealth building versus life building. Many people buy property and they start compromising their other dreams and got stuck in it. We don't explore much this angle, especially in immigrant clan. How you see it in our parents or grandparents' time, it was very relevant. I totally get it, what you say. Is it still like 20 years, 40 years ago, or the fabric changed?
Oh, yeah, the fabric is obviously changed because usually people didn't have to sacrifice a lot of things in their lifestyle. So, lifestyle now means things like travel, education, career exploration, hobbies, or family time. So, today, the economics of ownership often force people to choose between building wealth and building a full life. So these are critical things. And I think why the shift matters more for immigrants is immigrants' property can be make carry like an emotional weight as far as financial value. And many arrive with overlapping pressures. So things like insecurity, so visas, job stability, limited networks, fewer safety nets. So no place to fall back on. So whereas people who are already embedded in this country may always have the parental, the so-called mom and dad bank there to help them out. Ambition, the desire to catch up, that's a big factor for immigrants. Provides oneself and to create a secure base. The pressure of family expectations, cultural norms, and comparison with peers. So everyone wants to be where their friend has come, or the example is like, oh, I've been here for 5 years and I bought my own house. So then a person thinks, oh, he can buy his own house in 5 years, I should be able to buy mine in 5 years. But it doesn't always work like that. So you're limited inherent wealth, there's no fallback in housing, and fewer buffers if things go wrong. So in that context, property becomes more of an asset. It becomes a symbol of arrival, stability, achievement, and belonging. So these are key factors, I think. But once purchased, property can also be a gravity well that limits movement, choices, and imagination, as we said. People stay in jobs, even if they dislike it, for the sake of a mortgage, right? So I think that's also a factor. Career risk, instability feels too costly. The delay, abandoning, as I said previously, of business, travel, study, creative work. And the remains of the city are another factor because where the house is anchored, them that becomes an area for them to be comfortable in, getting to know your neighborhood, as they say. And then you feel guilty spending money on the non-essentials. So a lot of people, as you could imagine, just hark themselves in their home, and that's it. So I think if you take that aspect that you mentioned about what was happening 20, 40 years ago, those property remains still a powerful wealth building tool, but its advantage is less automatic than it's once seemed. So as I said, price to income ratios are much higher. Mortgage stress is more common. Interest rate cycling feel more volatile. Renting carries less stigma than once it did, and alternative wealth paths, index funding, global investment are more accessible. So these are, again, very key factors as we aspect. So the old guaranteed wealth is a narrative of therefore weaker. So culture relevance still strong but changing through stability, belonging, a place to raise children, visible symbol of achievement. What is changing is assumption that the ownership is only pathway to those outcomes. Life's relevance is also important, increasing misalignment. This is the biggest shift. So property used to enable life now often constrains life. So delayed having families, limited mobility, reduced risk taking, I guess. Yeah, that's an important factor. Narrower life experiences and higher stress and burnout.
So yes, definitely there is economic strains to our younger generations, which is a reality now. And what you rightly said, that perception also changing, like safety, stability, social identity, family pressure. These are the some reasons many people got into the game. And isn't it time already come to explore other avenues as well?
I guess, yeah, there's a lot of factors. What you're saying is good, but the symbol of safety has not changed in our problems today. So what I mean by cost of safety has increased dramatically, but young people are still encouraged to chase the same markers and stability as previously. So generations, they face very different realities. So I guess housing costs are historically high, as we know. Inflation erodes savings. The job market is less predictable. Wages lag way behind living costs. Now, a big factor in all things for people who live in a very comfortable lifestyle. Life's paths are less linear. Mobility matters more than ever, and the world changing faster than mortgages do. So we know the various wars, especially when it comes to materials and construction costs, and even to an extent of in our field as urban planners, how do we plan these larger enclaves of estates outside of the CBD, because the costs of machinery, the cost of the labor, the cost of building these estates have become, in especially as you mentioned before, the 20 or 40 years, is double or triple or even quadruple in some cases. So, that's a very big factor. Land costs have gone up dramatically.
So to sustain that, okay, like high income, dual income, parental assistance, inheritance, geographical compromise, delayed family formations, how government is thinking to explore more avenues.
Yeah, I mean, the government is trying to explore that we're trying to have more affordable housing and social housing, but that still doesn't take out the factor that you still have to build these places, and the cost to build these places is still exponential. So this is a big factor again. So you can't build places where the cost of building them is dramatic. I think some of the other avenues that we need is skill building, so portable security that moves with the person, diverse investments, so wealth building beyond property, getting some other assets in that, geographical mobility, so moving towards opportunities rather than being anchored by debt, community networks, so again, social stability and shared support amongst the communities. And then one of the big factors is the mental health resilience, the capacity to cope with the uncertainty. So that's a big factor. As we know, a lot of the mental health and wellness is caused by many factors, and housing is one of the major factors that also affect our mental health ability. So, and then we've got things like housing adaptation at different stage of our life and different incomes. So as they call it, downsizing. Yeah. So as kids move out, parents try to basically downsize their house. What else is there? There's shared equity models, so broader access into without full individual burden, where there are shared housing in the sense of people can clump together or use their incomes together to buy a house where they can almost live like they would in a rental shared house. So that's another option that's happening for younger people. Renting without the stigma, so stability without ownership pressure, and career adaptability. So long-term security through flexibilities. Again, gone are the days, we all know it now, that where you're in a job for 30 years, 40 years or more even, so you come in as a young person and then retire in that same job. You won't find many. Idea of flexibility, contracting, all these things. I think once you're settled or once you've sort of purchased the home is obviously a little bit easier to do than, as I said, when the banks or finances look at someone who's been on a contract or has a flexible job, it's always hard for them to get that mortgage, especially if it's the first mortgage that they're getting.
So next thing is activity center. It's a term Victorian government is using. What is it exactly?
So activity centers have been divided into various categories depending on infrastructure, transport, and hubs, basically hubs of where people can live. And the whole idea is to make it compact and walkable rather than having lots of areas where people live, like the outer suburb estates. So where the problem is there's not enough infrastructure, you don't have transportation hubs put in before the estates are built, education, community life, activities amongst one and connected places is very difficult. So these activity centers basically take on that and bring people together. So there's few categories. So let me talk about the first one, which is neighborhood activity centers. So that's your local shop, stripping shops on streets, service hubs for daily needs such as fresh food, medical care, retail, community services, education, and public transport. So these are places like, if you want to take a quick example, I guess, living in the eastern suburbs, like parts of Burke Road or Glenferrie Road, that have this sort of facility. But then you go to the major activity centers, which are the larger hubs. So these are the ones where there's more opportunity for jobs, more services, more housing, more retail, more transport connections. So places like Camberwell Junction or Toorak Village, Bayside, Brighton activity centres, even taking a little bit to the north, Moonee Ponds, Essington. These are the activity centres. Box Hill again in the eastern suburbs. And then you have the MAC, Metropolitan Activity Centres, major regional hubs with significant transport, education, health, culture, and civic facilities. So now these are the places like Geelong, Ballarat, Bendigo, all of these that are now becoming those regional towns. And they've been lacking in these areas that we mentioned, transport and health and facilities. But now, the government is seeing that the hospitals are being upgraded. They're looking at good connectivity with the trains. Regional trains lines are getting better, and there'll be more services. As of, I think, this weekend, even, there'll be more trains and trams around various rail network, but especially also in the regional areas. So I guess coming back, why government uses this concept is that it's mainly about creating jobs, good housing, good services in those areas, reducing car dependency. So you can live in these centers without having a car, encourage high density livings, which already exists in some way, but we're not talking about the really high rise of the CBD, South Bank or Docklands, but sort of medium between 5 and 10, 11 stories maybe. These are sort of being developed in these activity centers. Then there's the aspect of social interaction, community lifestyle. So having these community centers or community facilities allow people of any age, whether it's elderly, retirees, or whether it's younger people, to congregate and then become socially active and get to know your neighborhood. If you take the estates, your neighborhoods basically can be go in, drive in, do your activities, drive out the next day, and you may not even see your next door house or next door neighbor. But this is the way interaction is. And then the main key factors is what they call the 20-minute city. So all of these facilities are within walkable distance of 20 minutes. And now that's even been reduced to 15 minutes. So that's now becoming quite common in European examples. And we're trying to utilize that now in Australia too.
So it's not just a place where we live, it's the total package basically we need to focus. It comes to your priority from which angle you want to see, like shrinking spaces, amenities, facilities. It comes down to your choice, right?
I think so. I think I'll just add a bit also, Gautam, that why activity centers matter for the futures is that activity centers represent a shift away from the old model of suburban expansion and pushing people out, whereas housing may be cheaper, but daily life can be harder. So the community aim of bringing housing, jobs, transport, all major factors for the future of these activity centers. There's been a lot of uproar in some of the well-established eastern suburbs where people don't want this sort of aspect. But when you explain to them that this is what is the future, it's something that is government has been trying to convince people over the last 4 or 5 years that this program has been going and being actively implemented into these certain areas. So I think that's also a very important factor in terms of where the future of housing is going to go and how lifestyle of housing will go over the future too.
Another major thing is with AI, and AI is still coming. Maybe after COVID, there is a massive shift happen regarding this remote work. So how property market is seeing it? Will it minimize the pressure on the cities and more scattered living in future?
Yeah, AI is at this stage, it's very difficult to say whether how it will affect it. Office markets may feel the greatest disruption because they depend heavily on white collar employers, while areas where diverse workforces and adaptable industries may prove more resilient. So remote work has already changed office demand, as we know. So working from home has existed post-COVID. Divided office market is also a big factor. Premium offices have better amenities, location, and collaboration spaces. So the older and lower quality office space face weaker demand. So some suburbs have become more exposed. So suburbs with high concentration of vulnerable white collars may face greater risks if automation reduces local employment and areas depend on narrow employment base. Residents will relocate, they may investors, confidence falls, and local property demand softens. So that's where it can hit the property market probably in the future. With AI, again, it can be a hollow in some places while strengthening others, but depending on the adaptability, amenities, transport, and job diversity. Where it may help partially is to reduce pressure on bigger cities. Big cities will not lose relevancy, but will shift within and in between them. Where pressure may cause ease, suburbs heavily dependent on vulnerable white collar jobs and fringe areas where living commutes become less necessary and regional centers attract more remote seeking affordability and lifestyle, as we mentioned previously. So I guess the other aspect is where pressure may increase is walkability, amenity rich activity centers we mentioned, premium inner city areas, and job diversity, lifestyle in regions, connectivity, housing options, and cities that successfully build AI driven industries and attract skilled workers. So that's an important factor to remember.
So we are almost in the end of it. So the last question to you is, what is the most likely future of home ownership in Australia?
As we're seeing, it's going to be very tough to rebound back from what it was, in generations before. So as prices of growing of houses, we sort of got a stabilization at the moment. But if the interest rates stay stabilized and factors in the world become normalized, which is always hard to predict, then it's going to be more difficult to be able to have your own house. So I think they're saying that forecasts suggest that it could fall further to around 63% by 2040. And amongst those youngsters, 25 to 35, it's already declined from 61 to 43, as we mentioned before. So there's no sort of short-term affordable cycle. It's reflective of changes in price, income, deposit, security, and intergenerational wealth. So these are factors. Rent will become more norm, I think, and renting is likely a longer and more common life stage, including elderly households. So more lifestyle renters, I think renting becomes a major tenure for millennials and younger generations, and more lone persons and elderly household renting, and a greater pressure on rental protections and longer lease options. So this is another factor that's coming up already as of investors have to go out of the market because of taxation reasons. They're saying there could be an increase of 30% in rental. So that'll become another major factor for young people.
Anyway, so the okay, maybe the housing market will not behave the way it used to behave, but younger generations can look into other ways, and maybe they will focus more into life experience. And
Mm.
they have to be mobile, they have to be flexible what they want from life. So hopefully they will figure out something which is we are not even thinking in that way. So hope for the good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Raju. Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you, Gautam.